Welcome, welcome. You have arrived at session 3 of Getting Ready for Work. So welcome to all viewing live or later on. I'm Rachel Clark from Youthworx Pathways Program. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways in the area now known as Moreland, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, as well as to all First Nations people, communities present here tonight, but also who contribute to the life of the area. This is session 3 of a 4-part series called Getting Ready for Work, a training program run by Youthworx as part of our Employment Pathways support for our media students. Last week's session was on writing a resume, and a recording can be viewed on Moreland Library's Facebook and YouTube page, and with the details of the final session, because there's one more session after this on the Facebook page there. But this session is all about interviews. We will be joined by a special guest, Tom Burgess, Manager of Education and Industry Pathways from the Inner Northern Local Learning Employment Network in Len, who will be adding to the discussion in the comment section and is available to answer your questions too. So welcome, Tom. Right, we have a hello from Tom, possibly, if he's joined us. All right, so what is this session about? Well, as I've said, it's about interviews, all things to do with interviews. And we have 3 areas that we're going to cover. So the 3 areas that we're covering tonight are, number 1, how to prepare, what questions to ask and answer. Number 2, what questions to ask and answer. And number 3, what not to say or do. So there'll be time for questions after each section. Please type questions in the chat box as you think of them, because then I can get to them as I'm pausing. One moment. Apologies for that. And there'll be a resource sheet available at the end of the series after next week. So, some big ideas to get us started. I'm just wondering if we're all good here, because I'm not seeing the usual Heidi on, but that's okay, we will continue. Okay, some big ideas to get us started. Being interviewed isn't easy. Sitting in front of interviewers you don't know and being asked to ask questions is always hard regardless, no matter how many times you've experienced it. So be comforted that this is a hard thing to do for everybody. Most interviewees are nervous even when they know the answers to most of the questions. Thanks Heidi, appreciate that, that's great. But always remember that being called in for an interview is an opportunity to demonstrate who you are, because you already have been judged to have the skills and experience for the role, and the interviewers and the panel are simply to seeing if you're the right fit for the organisation. So it is a process where by the organisation and its managers gets to see the real person behind the resume and the letter of application. They're looking for people with attitudes that fit the culture of their workplace. So if you get an interview slot, this is your opportunity to show who you are. And we'll come to how you can prepare best, but be comforted to know that by being invited, they're really interested in what you have to say. And so big deep breaths and prepare, of course, but know that you have as much chance of getting the job as the next person who's coming in after you in an hour. The opportunity to demonstrate who you are is really what you've got. Okay, so first section. of this is how to prepare. Now, there's lots you can do to prepare, and that's why I've got 6 areas for you to think about. So let's start with the first one, research the organisation. So you've probably done that when you've been writing your letter of application for the particular role. But you can do a whole lot more. Once you've done that, you might have forgotten some key points. So go back in, do some more research. So what do you look for? So dive deep into the organisation's online presence. Follow them on whatever social media channels you use to get a sense of what they're putting out into the world. Go to their website, learn about their values, so how they behave together, how they project into the world, how they behave, their vision, what world they want to see, right? What's their big goal, and their mission, how they plan to get there. So read in the website, things that are going to give you more information, I suppose, about their beating heart, and also learn about current projects and programs. So you can really get a sense of where an organisation is in its lifespan by looking at the website, by doing some research behind the scenes, taking some notes, getting a sense of who they are and who they advertise themselves to be. And we've got a hello from Tom. Welcome, Tom. Thanks for joining us. Okay, we're in the how to prepare section. So that's number 1, research your organisation. Second one is think about why you want the job. You've probably spent a long time writing the letter of application, refining your resume for this particular job, but you might have applied to 10 other jobs in the meantime. Go back to the position description, go back to your letter of application and remind yourself what you said in it, first of all, but think, why do I really want this job? So they might ask you, why do you want this job? And you need to have a really clear answer to that. So here are some other questions that are sort of asking around the why should we hire you? Why do you want the job? So here they are. So think about how you might answer those. Tell me about yourself. Okay, so thinking about how you might respond in relation to why you want this job. Why do you want to work for this company? How did you hear about the job? Tell me something about your resume. Tell me something on your resume. Why are you looking for work? Why should we hire you? Very direct question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Now, here's an interesting one that you might think, I wonder why they're asking me this, but tell me about a conflict you faced at work and how you dealt with it. So they're really wanting to see how you self-regulate, how you manage yourself in stressful situations, what your communication skills are like, how you work under pressure. So, they're sussing out, is this a person that can work within our context? But here's another question they might ask you. What's your dream job? What do you expect out of your team or your co-workers? So they're working out how independent you are or how much you like working on your own, how much of a team player you are, etc. What do you expect from your manager? Interesting. And how do you deal with stress? Okay, so those are some questions that when you're thinking about reflecting back to them why you really want that job, you can be thinking about those questions in that area of why me? Why this job? All right, that's the second area of preparation, right? The third is using some of the examples that you might have shared in those second question areas to come up with some concrete examples, some real examples. Now, there's an acronym that is used in interviewing called the STAR approach, as in star in the sky, STAR. The STAR approach stands for number 1, situation, number 2, task, number 3, action, and number 4, result. So when you're thinking about explaining what you've done in your world of experience, think about number 1, situation. Well, I was in a role where I was responsible, task. I was asked to, 3, action. So I decided to, and number 4, result. And when I did that, this happened. So that they're asking you to give a little scenario where you really had an impact. So you can be thinking about concrete, real examples of a situation in time where you responded, and you're going to demonstrate that using the STAR approach. So that's another way you can prepare. That's the third way. The fourth way, practicing for an interview. I'm going to ask Tom Do you agree with the STAR approach? Do you think that would help? Looking forward to your ideas. Have you got some good examples where people have used that? Anything that you might want to share about the STAR approach? Number 4, practicing for the interview. So yes, you can be thinking about this, writing it all down, but actually spend some time in real time with a friend, a trusted colleague, somebody that you're okay to have a go and won't feel embarrassed, etc. Or you can video yourself. If you're on your own and you want to do it that way, video yourself and see how you respond. So really good idea to practice getting into, definitely, says Tom, thank you. Getting into that mindset of being in the hot seat, literally, for the interview and how you might sit. And then, of course, that comes on to the next stage, which is what you're going to wear. So that's your 5th area when you're planning. What are you going to wear? Again, according to industry, it will determine how casual or how formal. Usually you're going to be dressing formally in some way, but formal looks different for different industries. Now, here's a really good tip on getting some advice and maybe even getting some really good work clothes or interview clothes. So 2 organisations that I know of, one Fitted for Work, the second one Ready Set. And again, these will be in the resource sheets at the end. But if you remember Fitted for Work and Ready Set, you can find and book an appointment. And so Fitted for Work targets is a service provided for women, and Ready Set is a service that supports all genders. Okay, so you can go for some personal grooming support, come away with an interview suit or something suitable for the industry, and they will help you do that. Fantastic organisations. So plan what to wear, number 5. Number 6, final one, be on time. Oh my goodness me, of course. Do a trial run to the place if you're going in person. Know how long it's going to take you, know how to get there, know where it is. If it's online, of course, it's easier, right? So, but prepare your background. Make sure your background is professional. You manage any noise interruptions. So if you are going to a place, a physical place, arriving on time actually means being early, right? So it doesn't mean arriving at the allocated time that your interview is. It means being maybe 20, 15 minutes early so that you can settle yourself, introduce yourself, go to the toilet, do whatever you need to do. You have one shot at demonstrating to the interviewers that you are the person that they want. So first impressions count enormously. It also allows you to breathe, to regroup, just to get yourself ready. Of course, the same rules apply when you're in a job as well. Being on time, being early is the way to do it. Being late is never a good look. I'm going to pause now because we've got some links here that have been added. That's terrific. So yeah, a good question to Tom from Heidi. Thanks for that, Heidi. Is there a website to find some good examples of common interview questions? So we might have Tom answer that for us. So any questions from the audience as well on the preparation, how to prepare? There's quite a lot you can do to prepare, isn't there? So you might be thinking of some questions as you're watching. I'm going to go now on to the second section because that links to the question that Heidi asked, what questions to ask and answer. So, of course, you don't know what your interview panel or individual interviewers are going to ask you, but there are some common questions that they will ask you, and Tom is going to provide some ideas around that or some links to some suitable resources. But what you can prepare is what questions you're going to ask. So there you go, we've got some lovely resources up there, thanks Tom. Some really great resources from the Inner Northland service, yeah. So questions to ask. It's always really impressive for an interviewer to be asked questions by an interviewee. Now, are you surprised by that? I think I might have been a little while ago, thinking I'm just here to answer questions. It's not my place to ask questions. But absolutely it's your place to ask questions. And when you do ask questions, as long as they're the right type of questions, you're going to demonstrate an attitude of curiosity and initiative. And that is, if we remember back to session 1, those are some of the attitudes that employers are looking for. So when you're in an interview, employers are looking for clues about how you might behave when working in a job. So the questions that you ask will demonstrate how you will behave, right? How flexible you are, how willing to learn the willingness to learn that you have. So demonstrate curiosity and initiative by being curious about the world around you, and demonstrating that you are interested in that world, and that you can ask questions which will help you manage new and potentially challenging situations at work, and that you take the interview process seriously by coming prepared, having done your research about the role in the organisations. So I guess the question you might have is, well, what questions do I ask? You know, what are suitable questions? So here are 4 suitable questions or question areas, right? Number 1, recent areas of success or growth for the organisation. Towards the end of the interview, or maybe as you're discussing your work role or the opportunities that you might have in the role, an area of recent success or growth is a relevant question to ask. You might also ask how employees are supported to develop professionally in the organisation. So there you're demonstrating your desire to learn and extend yourself and be the best worker in the role. You could also ask the values and vision of the team that you'll be working in, and what makes the organisation a great place to work. Employers really like talking about their workplace, especially if they're really proud of it. So those are some really great questions to ask. Remember that asking questions reveals that you're genuinely interested in being involved in the work and the role you've applied for. And remember that employers are looking for attitudes. They know you've already got the skills, but if you don't have the right attitude, you won't be the right fit for the place. So it's really important that you demonstrate attitudes of curiosity and engagement. Of course, as I said before, it demonstrates you've done your research. It shows curiosity and initiative, which are incredibly important skills in the modern work environment. So I've got a couple more areas, and I note that we've got some ideas here from Tom. He's linked some real industry job interview techniques and connections to opportunities to practice. So thank you for that, Tom. That's wonderful. All right, so we're still in the what questions to ask and answer section. So let's move to answering questions now. Well, remember our STAR approach. Remember to prepare job-related answers and use the STAR approach. Now, this is a really interesting one, which is around personal questions, or questions that you might see as personal. So remember that your potential employer, is wanting to get to know you. They are wanting to learn more about you and your personality. Nice comment, yeah. Posture in interviews too. Lean forward and look attentive. Look engaged and interested. Hey, Tom, what about legs crossed or legs not crossed? Closed body language. What's the sort of professional? What's your perspective on that? We'll come back to you from that. So they may be asking you questions. Employers may be asking you questions that you might think are a bit personal, and some are inappropriate, and we'll go to those in a minute, right? Ones that you don't have to answer. But when employers are asking more about you than your work experience, they're really trying to learn about the character that you have and the personality that you have. Remember, it's up to you how much you share about yourself, but giving enough information to give them a sense of who you are is really important. And that obviously leads on to what you don't have to talk about. So a bit of a recap. Remember that employers are looking for people who will work well with other people, are able to learn new skills, can ask for help, are reliable. So by demonstrating a realistic understanding of what you know now and what you're keen to know more about through questions and answers, will support employers to see you as a suitable candidate. So any questions on questions? Section 2, what questions to ask and answer. Any questions from the audience about that? That's a lot to take in. Well, are you surprised that you can answer questions? Sorry, ask questions. Not surprised that you have to answer questions. Are you surprised you can ask questions? Maybe there's a question you thought, oh, I wouldn't ask that you've come away from today. So I guess here's the final section of where we're going with this Facebook Live event. What not to say or do. Okay, here we go. Tom's added a brilliant section here. Legs closed, please don't fold your arms and don't lean back looking too relaxed. Yeah, good point. So legs can be closed, so you can cross your legs, Tom. That's okay. That makes sense to me. But the closed arms is an indication of closed body language and closed offness. So yes, and leaning back can seem as if you're not so interested. Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's move on to the third and final section, which is what not to say or do. Okay, questions or attitudes not to share in interviews is the sort of overarching things. Well, I've got 10 of them, and I've taken it directly from some advice that I'll put a link to in the resource list. But the first one is, don't say, what would I be doing in this role? Because you should know what you're doing in the role, right? You should have read the PD. You can be asking more details about the role, but not a general, just tell me about the role. Okay, don't do that. Number 2, I can handle any situation. Yeah, I'm okay with anything. Well, no, you can't, and that's not realistic, and don't pretend that it is. It's okay to say that you don't know about certain things. It's also okay to say you do really well in this situation. So generalizations are not helpful. Number 3, try not to ask about pay. Again, that's a conversation you can have before you go for an interview with somebody from HR, from the organisation. Best not to bring it up in an interview situation. Number 4, do not speak negatively about previous employers or colleagues. That reflects really poorly. If you're doing it in an interview now, they might think, well, that they might be doing that actually when they're in this workplace. So make sure you don't do that. Don't be overconfident, number 5. Don't be overconfident. So there's a balance, isn't there, from the leaning back appearing to be bored and leaning forward being interested. But overconfidence, maybe exaggerating things that you've done in the past, that doesn't come across well. Employers will be able to see through that. They'll ask you follow-up questions which you won't be able to answer convincingly. All right, so my goodness me, we're almost halfway through the 10 areas that we should not say or do. Number 6, do not say that you are desperate or need a job. Desperation is not will not get you a job. So yes, even if you really are desperate and you really want to get a job because you need it for all the reasons that we might know, being calm and collected is the best approach. Number 7, interesting, don't blame answers on nerves. Yeah, so we all get nervous and it's okay to be nervous, but constantly blaming nerves on not performing well, again, is to be avoided. Don't say somebody recommended you to the role. Well, yeah, I can see the reason for that. You're making the choice yourself, aren't you, to apply for this job, and you're there on your own merit. So important to own that. Number 9, avoid saying that you've never watched anything they've done, not interested in their industry or used their product. You get the idea, right? Yeah, I thought I'd be interested in applying for this role, but so what do you like about the product? I don't know, I've never used it. Shows that you're not prepared, doesn't it? And finally, number 10, talking about a competitor, a bit similar to employers or colleagues. Avoid talking poorly about anybody else, actually. Concentrate on the people at hand, the role that you're there for, demonstrate positive goodwill. You want to make the best impression, and if you do any of those, you may well undermine some really good examples that you're bringing to the situation. I'm just going to pause and have a look at some questions and answers. So Heidi says, is it okay to take questions you want to ask into your interview? Great, written down, absolutely. So Tom says, definitely notebook and pen with questions on indicates you're prepared. Brilliant, brilliant answer. But employers and interviewers will help you with an opening dialogue to help you relax. That is their job, absolutely. They're not there to make you feel as uncomfortable as possible. That's not a good interview situation for anyone. All right, I'm going to move on to now the next section of the things that you do not have to answer, right? So we've covered questions not to ask from you. Okay, what about questions that you do not need to answer? There are some questions that are illegal to ask, and I will talk about them shortly. I will put a link again in the resources so you can have a look about discriminatory interview practice, okay? Very difficult in the moment when you're sitting there and you're wanting to get the job, you're wanting to make a good impression, you don't want to appear rude or not answer any questions. But you do have a right to not answer questions such as this. Are you in a same-sex relationship? Not relevant. How old are you? Not relevant. What's your ethnic background? You get the same, not relevant. What religion are you? Are you pregnant or planning to start a family? Who do you vote for? Do you have a physical or mental disability? All of those are discriminatory interview questions, and they are a part of an illegal, they are illegal interview questions to ask, and I'll put a link to those to give you further information. Oh, great question from Katya, thank you. What happens if you have family conditions? When do you discuss this, such as responsibilities for maybe parents or you're a carer, children, etc.? That's a great question. I'm going to ask Tom to respond to that. Please, in the chat, that would be fantastic, whilst I finish off this section and then I'll add to it. Thank you for that question. A final point is that you may have prior convictions. You may have had a period in your life where you were convicted of a crime. Now, that may or may not be relevant to the role that you're applying for, okay? You may need to complete a police check as part of organisational requirements before being offered a job. You can discuss this with your potential employer, and if it isn't relevant to your role, then it should not be used against you. Yeah. They will follow a procedure. There is a procedure for these things in organisations, and it's about fairness and how we manage the safety of the organisation and fairness and equal opportunities for potential employers. So it is important to raise it with your potential employer, and there will be a procedure that is followed. So even though being asked about a criminal record in an interview is not an employer obligation, it may be asked, and you have to decide at that moment how you share that information, bearing in mind if you don't disclose it and you later need to, what the impact of that might be. It's a personal decision on a very personal area. So let us consider also, I'd love to hear from Tom around the prior convictions question or area. So coming back to Katya, what happens if you have family responsibilities? Is that goes to your question, doesn't it? Family responsibilities, I think. When do you discuss this? Well, my advice would be that you don't need to discuss it in the interview. You wait until you are offered the position, and then the terms and conditions around the job are then discussed about where you would work, how you would work, which hours you would work. That would be my advice. I'd be interested to hear Tom's good question about family conditions. If you've looked at the PD and you can do the hours and the job, then family conditions can be managed by you. Excellent answer. Yeah. So you shouldn't be discriminated against based on your caring responsibilities, as long as the position description has made it clear that of the roles and the tasks that you need to do, and you can do them with those other responsibilities. Yeah. So Heidi says, if you have organised a holiday after the work start date, can you say this in an interview? Is it better discussed once you've been offered the job? What do you think, Tom? That this has happened to me, as I'm sure it's happened to many of us. I've waited to be offered the job and then raised it with them afterwards. What do you think, Tom? My advice generally is you want to provide them with a really positive picture of you in the interview that answers all of their questions freely and easily in relation to doing the job. The other areas of being a human being with all of our competing claims is separate to that, right? That happens all the time. But you as a person who has responsibility, sorry, you as a person who has experience for that role, that's the focus of the interview. They judge you on that, and then we have opportunities to discuss, if they offer you the role, how you start it, when you might need to take leave, how they're going to manage that. That's a great question. So I'm noting it's 7 o'clock, but we can go a little bit over. We've got the opportunity to do that because we have other additional questions. So I'll wait to hear Tom's perspective on the holiday start, because that's a really good one and a very common one. In fact, it often happens. You arrange a holiday and you get an interview and you think, it's almost like you know, the interview decided that this was the opportunity just to be a bit tricky. Yeah, so Tom says tricky, but it has to be raised sooner or later. If the employer thinks that they want you, they will be flexible. Absolutely, yes. And if it's a 1 week holiday, it might be that you can defer the start of your employment and start after you've gone on holiday. If it's a 3-month holiday, that's a little trickier, and probably something to explore sooner rather than later, because it compromises the role. Yeah. If you are offered the job, if you aren't offered the job, should you call to get feedback on how you went in the interview? Oh, every single time, I would say. This is the best way of getting better at being interviewed, is to get feedback from people that have witnessed you being an interviewee just recently. It's not comfortable necessarily. If it's done well, it's a really rewarding experience. I recently asked for it myself and got all sorts of insights that have helped me. It's not always done well, so it sometimes can be uncomfortable, but I think it's worth trying. Tom says feedback is a definite yes. It's how you get better. You might not know that you do a funny thing with your arm when you're under pressure, and that might be something that you do, and that's okay, but you might want to know about it. Similarly, they probably won't talk about that because, yes, I'd imagine they wouldn't, but they might say, actually, we needed to hear more specific detail from in more concrete examples, that you gave us short examples and we needed to know more. So that's a really good tip, prepare more around the STAR approach. But how do we get better without feedback? Trial and error. And I think Tom said something similar to that earlier, didn't you? Which is around practice. The more you practice, the better you get at it. Okay, so we have ticked over to past 7 o'clock. Happy to stay on if there are any more questions. But in close, here's my thoughts. Think of interviews as opportunities for you to learn about the vibe of the organisation. Through the conversation, and Tom talked about that, really good interviews should be conversations, right? That you have with the interviewer and panel, and for you both to consider, is this the right workplace for you? When interviewing is done really well, it's a two-way process for both the candidate and the interview panel to work out, do we like each other? Could we work well together? So it's a rewarding experience done well, and I wish you so much luck with it. I'm going to look to the questions now. Katya's got some other great questions. Sometimes the people who are interviewing you do not respond to your emails or call. How do you get to them? So is this, Katya, after you've been interviewed? So you've also said, is it your right to know the result? As in whether you got the job or not, or the feedback. So maybe I'll answer, you absolutely need to have an entitlement to know whether you got the job if you've gone for an interview. Absolutely. Do they have to give you feedback? No, they don't have to give you feedback, but it's good practice when they do. And if they don't give you feedback, that probably tells you something about the employer, that you might not want to work for them if they don't have the time and energy to provide constructive feedback. So yes, I hope I've answered your questions. Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yes, after. Yes. So Tom says, especially if you haven't been applying for jobs for a while. More practice. Yeah, feedback. Great. Right. I'm sorry to hear that, Katya. That's disappointing that they don't. I wonder why they might not. Sometimes there might be a switchover of staff, possibly. The person that has interviewed you is no longer, has moved, all sorts of reasons, possibly. And you might want to phone the switchboard and make an inquiry about who you might be able to talk to get feedback, because you would value it. You do have to be at times bold in this situation, and it can be a bit difficult and cringy to put yourself in the situation, especially if you haven't got the role. But as Tom said, it is professional to give feedback. It absolutely is. It's not a one-way street. Yeah, you gave your time to the potential employer, and they have. It's good practice to provide some thoughts back to potential employers, because those, you as a potential employer have then had a bad experience with that employer, and that's not a good look for the employer. So it's really worth their while. If there's any employers out there that don't give feedback to potential employees, then please do so. Yeah, absolutely. Like it's tricky, Katya. I hear that. Yeah, you can be as bold as you want, and sometimes you're not heard. Absolutely. And there are situations, I suppose, and this gets to more the legal elements of it, around people making choices because of certain physical conditions. But it's a tricky area. So Tom says they may say when the job ad is up that they'll only reply to successful applicants. Yes, that I've seen that too, absolutely. And that might be their way of getting out of a whole load of admin. You can still call them and ask them for feedback, assuming that you didn't get the job. They may not answer, but yeah. Yes, it depends on the industries, I would imagine. Thanks so much for your questions. That's wonderful. Any other questions from viewers that we have before we sign off? This is a really interesting area, isn't it? And I guess the summary is, the more that you can present yourself professionally at all times, the better in the long run, because you are demonstrating how you would be in a job. So they might not know, they might not have a position for you now, but they might remember how close you came and how interested you were in finding feedback, and they might remember that. They might actually call you, they might headhunt you for another particular role. That happens all the time. I don't know if you want to add to that, Tom, but you know, it's not, we get jobs not just by applying for them from wherever it is. Sometimes people recommend us, right? Or then we are known to them, and they might think, oh, you know, they've had 55 applications, they've interviewed 5 people, and they have appointed 1 person, and they simply haven't had time to contact the people they didn't they didn't appoint. We think it's good practice that they do, but they didn't. But they remember those 4 people. They're thinking, okay, maybe for the next time. So you may get a call. So if you then make a call to the potential employer, your employer that you didn't get a job with, and demonstrate your further commitment to learning, they might pick up the phone next time. Yeah, absolutely. The Pursuit of Happiness film is really spot on when it demonstrates the challenge, right? These structural challenges, yeah. So yeah, Heidi says, if you wish to recommend this talk, please do. It's really wonderful for people to be able to watch it afterwards. It's available on the Facebook page for Moreland Libraries. It's also available on Moreland Libraries' YouTube channel. That comes a couple of days later. But yeah, please do recommend this to friends and colleagues. And thank you so much for being here tonight. Tom's final words are, be keen and remember, be keen and they will remember you. And they may get back to you if there's another option of a role, of a job in the future. So I think I'm going to close now by saying, look forward to seeing you next week, where we'll be talking about workers' rights and responsibilities, the fourth of our 4-part series on jobs, getting a job, and all that entails. It will be next week, March the 10th, Wednesday at 6:30. Thank you so much for your questions, all of you, and Katja. Thanks so much for Tom for being present. Always wonderful to have experts from the field recognising all the experience that you bring to conversations such as this. Thanks everybody for viewing. See you next week. Bye.